This is Outnumbered. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee McEnany here with my co-host Emily Compagno. Also joining us, Kennedy, Cheryl Casoni, and Lawrence Jones on this Friday. The Biden White House seems to be on constant damage control as crisis after crisis keeps erupting. First up today, spending the jobs numbers, which showed the slowest pace of growth in more than a year, even though 390,000 jobs were added last month. But the president seemed to think it's all a positive sign.
As we move to a new period of stable, steady growth, we should expect to see more moderation. We aren't likely to see the kind of blockbuster job reports month after month like we had over this past year. But that's a good thing. That's a sign of a healthy economy.
Except for that inflation and the baby formula and a looming possible recession, but there's all that. And last night, the president, he took up the issue of gun control.
I respect the culture and the tradition and the concerns of lawful gun owners. At the same time, the Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
But new reports of turmoil behind the scenes are raising questions about the president's ability to solve the problems that arose on his watch. On Tuesday, NBC News reported Biden is unhappy about a pattern that has developed inside the West Wing. He makes a clear and succinct statement, questionable, my words, only to have aides rush to explain what he actually meant, which was something else. The so-called cleanup campaign, he has told advisors, undermines him and smothers the authenticity that fueled his rise. Later that day, the Washington Post chimed in with this headline: White House scrambles on inflation after Biden complains to aides. And yesterday, CNN followed suit, writing at the center is a president still trying to calibrate himself to the office. The country is pulling itself apart. Pandemic infections keep coming. Inflation keeps rising. A new crisis on top of new crisis arrives daily, and Biden can't see a way to address that while also being the looser, happier, more sympathetic, lovingly onion parody, inspiring aviator-wearing, vanilla chocolate chip cone-licking guy, an image that was the core of why he got elected in the first place. Lawrence, a quote from that same article really struck me. It was from a White House aide. They said this: he has to speak to very serious things, explained one White House aide, and you can't do that while getting ice cream.
This is true. I think it's the opposite issue for Joe Biden, though. He should do less speaking, more listening. I would be doing round tables around the country, talking with the voters that he says that he was going to represent. But you can't run a campaign on a lie. He promised to be a moderate like Joe Manchin. Instead, he attacks Joe Manchin. Look, this president clearly is getting messages and allowing them to operate from different factions in his party, in his administration. You can govern with that. Donald Trump had never Trumpers, people that supported the agenda, moderate Republicans there, but you need someone that's going to steer the ship. He's not steering the ship. He doesn't have a compass to say yes or no, yay or nay. This is why we see the communications department in disarray, is because when you have different senior advisors that are crafting the message and putting it out there, they're having to backtrack every single day. Different people. There is really no person that is steering the ship. If I had one piece of advice for the president is, as I said, to go do those town halls, but to also get back to the basics. I mean, all these virtual signaling pieces, all these press conferences aren't going to matter unless you go to kitchen table issues that matter to the American people. And the last thing I'll say this, because he's going after guns now, you can't say that you love the folks, you understand the folks, and then attack the folks. The number one demographic of getting guns right now is black women, which is the base of the Democratic Party. So how do you speak to those voters that are now going to get those guns? I haven't heard an answer from the White House on that.
No, I haven't heard that point raised. That's a great one. Emily, speaking of the press and communications shop, a little tidbit about how they're feeling. White House aides emailing each other during one of President Joe Biden's stops on the road. They were tracking who's covering what he's saying, which TV channels were taking his live speeches, and realizing a number of times the answer was none. You're thinking, one person said, why are we doing this? Now, I understand that frustration. You're on Air Force One. I remember having to do this. You call bureau chiefs. You say, cover the president's speech. He's going to be talking about the economy. He's going to a factory. They never do. Those are highly scripted events. What they do cover are press conferences What they do cover are presidential interviews that get widely circulated, but we have a guy who can't seem to do those things.
Well, and they would probably cover it more if there was an authenticity about it, right? If we actually heard something that wasn't scripted, re-scripted, and repeated talking points that are bald-faced lies. Look, even the Democrats right now are calling him out. We have Representative Stephanie Murphy from Florida saying, look, this president has failed to outline an intellectually honest plan to combat inflation. All Americans see this equally. That's why they're not turning on the TV to watch him. They're sick of it. They're sick of the lies. And, in the intro, we talked about him being elected because he eats ice cream and he somehow attempted or projected himself as being relatable. But a lot of people believed that he would be a unifier. And the fact that we are now hearing reports that he is in part complaining, saying he's not getting a fair shake by the media, by fellow Democrats, grousing that Republicans aren't getting the share of the blame that they are due. To your point, it would do him well to look in the mirror and to listen rather than just focus on what fingers are pointing in other directions, because right now he's failing as a leader and he's failing to make us care whether he's that aw shucks guy. I don't care anymore, because what I need is a president that cares about me and the value of my dollar and the food on my table and my safety.
And Kennedy, it seems like people are jumping ship. This was a very disciplined White House, tight-lipped. They didn't talk to reporters. That's all changed. I mean, take a look at this wall here. You have NBC, based on interviews with 24 current and former admin officials, lawmakers, congressional aides, Washington Post, 2 people familiar with the president's comments. They're leaking his private conversations. Then there's this CNN, 14 White House aides and other Democrats. It's as if as the ship sinks, you got a lot of people kind of jumping off, even if it's just anonymously talking to a reporter.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, you've been inside the White House. You know how these things work. And one of the things frustrated staffers are saying is Joe Biden is insulated by the old guard, people who have been around him for decades. And then, and they are trying to run a very 90s media playbook in the year 2022. It doesn't work anymore. They're worried about, network news mentions and what's going on the front page of local newspapers. People don't watch and read that stuff. That they're operating with the 90s playbook. The other half of the White House staff, they were born in the 90s. None of this makes sense to them. All of these people are so incredibly out of touch. All they're trying to do, instead of crafting policy to ease people's pain and make things better, they're just blaming people. It's like because something might look bad. He doesn't have any serious solutions. Much is forgiven when the economy is going well in terms of personality, as you know, but it doesn't matter if you are Amtrak Joe, if people cannot afford to buy food for their kids or put gas in the car.
Yeah, to that end, buried in the bottom of this Washington Post piece about inflation, Cheryl, was this line: it seems like they've given up doing anything and have settled into figuring out what the best thing to say is, said one person in close communication with senior White House economists speaking on conditions of anonymity. There's almost more debate about the right messaging than the right policy stance. Right. Take a listen, case in point, and then on to you, Cheryl.
This is a Putin price hike, but actions have already helped to blunt what would have been an even larger Putin price hike. Food and gas prices are going to be elevated by Putin's price hike.
Putin's price hike. Here we go again. Now, there's a new term that we've heard today after the jobs report came out this morning. It is steady, stable growth. That is going to be their new talking point, which they debuted this week, by the way. I think we all see through this now because they know that what we're seeing in those job numbers that came out today, and that's why he went to the podium today, was to champion and talk about how great that jobs report was. It is not when you have restaurants that are cutting back hours and they can't afford to pay $20 an hour to a teenager who won't take less than $20 an hour to work at a restaurant. So it's Putin's fault. That's why energy prices are higher, et cetera, et cetera. I keep looking for a plan out of the White House. On the Business Network, we want action. Okay, these are numbers. These are dollars and cents. This is Wall Street looking for an answer. Their answer is the Fed's going to handle it. Poor Jerome Powell. I actually feel sorry for the guy at this point. It's on his shoulders. And also, they want to go after those greedy corporations because, they don't pay their taxes. And we all know that that's absolutely not the case. By the way, we haven't talked about Elon Musk yet, one of my favorite topics at this point. He's talking about making job cuts at Tesla. One of the reasons he's concerned about the economy, there's a lot of talk about recession coming. I think what you're seeing now is the White House changing the talking points to get everybody ready for what we know is going to be in the second half of 2022. We're going to have a rough economy, possibly a recession. You've already had negative GDP. I could go on and on and on with the data and the numbers. So don't give me the Putin price hike or the steady, stable growth. That's going to be the new one that we're going to see on Twitter today.
Americans also want ownership. They want a plan, but to blame it on other factors, take some ownership. They're not saying to say this is all my fault, but they want some acknowledgement. Also, President empathy, act like you care.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he cares, and I hear that from voters, from diners all across the country. It doesn't seem like the president cares about us, feels like there's some urgency that needs to happen. You know, this whole formula thing is a prime example. The fact that they weren't all on this, all over this, and say, well, we briefed them, it kind of slipped through the cracks. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And he acts like things are happening to him. Oh, I didn't hear about it till April. And one of the pieces, it said, oh, when are the locusts coming? Poor me, woe is me. It's all happening to me. No, it's happening to babies. It's happening to you, and you can feel it.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.